Okay, we're going to do something a little bit different. I got the idea for this from a BYU Family History Center presentation a few years ago. And I call it little bites for busy people. We're going to try to talk about how we can address the issue of those people that say, I just don't have time for family history, and try to show you just a nice representation of a bunch of things that can be used to grab the interest of those that say they don't have time and fit their schedule better. So let's dive into this a little bit. And I've always felt like the biggest, there's two big comments that usually are the ones people try to hide behind to get out of family history. One is it's all done. And of course, the other one is I'm just too busy. I don't have time for this. And I know we've all heard this numerous times. And so what we want to do is address that issue tonight and talk about some things that are quick and easy that somebody could do. But let's look at this a little bit further. Part of the problem, I believe, is in testimony. People don't want to do family history work because they really don't have a testimony of it. And this is Bob speaking. Bob doesn't believe that you have a big block called testimony. What I think you have is you have a lot of bricks that make up that testimony wall. And those bricks are the different topics, as I call them, different parts, facets of the gospel. Things like the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and tithing, prayer, prophet, family history. And each of those is independent of the others. You really have to develop a testimony of each and every one of those things. And many of us, since we're not perfect yet, I know I'm not, so I can speak from my experience. I know that I'm not at the same place on every one of those. And so I believe a lot of the people, when they avoid family history or they avoid missionary work or whatever the topic is that we're talking about, is mainly because they haven't developed a testimony. And it's kind of a catch-22 because they have to participate in it to really gain the testimony of it. You can't get a testimony of prayer without praying. You can't get a testimony of tithing without tithing. And you can't get a testimony of family history without participating. And this is what the brethren fully understand and why they have built this massive group of technological things for us so that we can all be involved, that we can all have our interests pricked so that we can begin to develop a testimony of family history work and the importance of it. And that importance has been known for a long time by our brethren. So really, when you get right down to it, when we say we're too busy, what we really need to do, though, is look at what I call that time we waste every day. I know my phone, I love it because my phone gives me a report every week of how much time I've spent on social media. And since it's been giving me that report, I'm very aware more than ever of how much time I spend on there. Of course, I've found ways to get around it. Since I work on Facebook, I just don't do my work for the missionary work in Facebook on my phone. I do it on the computer, then it won't register that I'm spending my time there. But the point is, we all spend a lot of time on social media, some of us on television or games or whatever the case is. There's time in the day where we're doing things that aren't productive and could be used for better things. And so our goal is to try to convince our patrons to invest just a little bit of that time in family history, because over time, as they do, their hearts will be touched and they'll begin to grow that testimony that we want them to have. This idea of family history work being important goes all the way back to Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Brigham spent many a day doing the endowments for people going through the Nauvoo temple before they left. He spent whole days doing nothing but doing instruction. So he knew about the importance of temple work. He said, we have a work to do that's just as important in its sphere as the Savior's work was in its sphere. Our fathers cannot be made perfect without us. We can't be made perfect without them. They've done their work and now sleep. We are now called to do ours, which is to be the greatest work man has ever performed on the earth. I don't think there was any question in Brigham's mind as to the importance of family history and temple work. President Nelson said, nothing opens the heaven quite like the combination of increased purity, exact obedience, earnest seeking, daily feasting on the words of the Book of Mormon, and regular time committed to temple and family history work. And President Nelson talks about that from personal experience. He has spent a lot of time on his own personal family history work. President Oaks said, what in the work of redeeming the dead, there are many tasks to be performed, and that all members should participate by prayerfully selecting those ways that fit their personal circumstances at a particular time. This should be done under the influence of the Spirit of the Lord and with the guidance of priesthood leaders who issue calls and direct the church administration portions of this work. Now, listen to this. Our effort is not to compel everyone to do everything, but to encourage everyone to do something. And that's really what our role as consultants is. Our role is to encourage everybody to do something, to find that thing that each and every one of our potential patrons will find reasonable for them to do, enjoyable for them to do, and will resonate with them. And so what we want to do tonight is to try to approach that by introducing to you a lot of things that you probably are already familiar with, but maybe some that you aren't, and try to give you some ideas of what to do to help our patrons, especially those that feel like they just don't have time to do the traditional stuff. So we're going to categorize these suggestions through the Discover, Gather, and Connect mantra that the Family History Department has issued as their key categories for how everything's organized in family history: discovering, gathering, and connecting. And so all the things that I will introduce tonight will link to one or the other of these. So we're going to start off with discovery type activities that can be used in a family to help them discover about their family. This is especially good for those who may not know much about their family because they've resisted getting involved, and so they really don't have much of a background even on their own family. And so some quick ideas for things would be like to read a story of your ancestor, or to view photos of your ancestors found over in memories, play family history games, watch a recorded class from RootsTech. And like I say, there's 30,000 of them. There ought to be something there that interests you. Review a discovery page of your ancestor, or discover who you look like. And these are just a few. These are 6 ideas out of many, many. But I thought we'd just highlight these 6. Read a story. You know, I really believe that a lot of our church members have never been in to the tree and spent any time in the memories on their ancestors. And we know that we can turn the fan chart on by clicking stories and see which of our ancestors have stories. And in this case, we only need one. So anything other than white is an ancestor that's got at least one story. And so we have a lot of options of people to read about. And these stories can be very interesting. This happens to be one of my great-grandfathers. And the thing I think is interesting in that second paragraph is they were pioneers to Utah. And when his parents got to Provo, where they settled and got ready to build their house, the first thing they did was unhitch their wagon and turn the wagon over and use the wagon propped up on its side a little bit with poles as their first home. And this is often what the pioneers did when they reached the place where they were going to live. And so, you know, if you don't read these stories, you don't realize how difficult their lives actually were. It was also interesting that Alexander's dad, Alexander Sr., fought in 3 Indian wars in Utah: the Walker War, the Tintic War, and the Black Hawk War. As their life wasn't without a lot of Indian skirmishes in the early 1850s, 60s, and 70s. Now, that's one way to get to these. There's actually an app called All the Stories that you can go to. And that's found over in the list of all the third-party products on Family Search. It's one of the things that's listed there. You can just search for stories and it'll come right up. And you click on it and it will verify which of your ancestors have stories, and you can pick an ancestor and then it'll list all the stories and you can go from there to read. But you know, stories have an ability to turn people's lives. It really turns their hearts to the ancestors. And if you can get these patrons of yours who are reluctant to actually work to just read about their ancestors, I think you'll find there'll be a lot of benefit to that. The other one is photos found over in Family Search. I think a lot of our members would go crazy if they would go into Tree and actually look at all the memories that are up there for their relatives, their ancestors, their cousins, and their aunts and uncles, and things like that. They'd be amazed at the richness of the photos that are found there. And I think it would really start, pictures to me really turn people's hearts. It would be a great way to start turning their hearts just by having them observe these and maybe pick an ancestor a night just to look at the photos for. And hopefully in the back of their mind, they start saying, well, gee, I've got 2 or 3 photos of this person that I don't see here. And we can use that as a way to get them started into memories. And we'll talk about that a little later. Playing a family history game. You wanting to find something to do on family home evening? Go to BYU Family History Technology Lab. And they have all kinds of games. I got derailed this afternoon. I was supposed to be preparing this and I went over into Ancestor Games and almost forgot myself, because over in Ancestor Games, they have all kinds of things. They've got word searches that can be made. They can take pictures in Tree and turn them into coloring pages for your grandkids. They have all kinds of things. They have a Jeopardy game called Genealogy, and they have a Wheel of Fortune game. They have a Record Quest, which is an actual kind of a video game that you can play that the kids would probably appreciate more than you and I would. They have one on geography, geneography, reverse indexing, which is a little bit like the new Get Involved program, where here all you're doing is help teach the computer which words are actually the word they're looking for in handwriting. It's helping to teach the computer how to read with artificial intelligence these records. Who's Your Daddy, which is a contest, a game for a contest game, and Tree Find, which is a little program that'll go through and help you find things in trees, like ancestors that don't have, or relatives that don't have any children but probably should, or relatives that don't have a spouse and may have had one and they're not showing, and things like that. And they're always adding to these. And so this is a way to try to show the family that there are things they can do that aren't threatening. And so, you know, like when you do the Jeopardy type game, when they ask the question, what you could do is give the family like 2 minutes and let them dig through the web page in Family Search and try to find the answer to the question. You know, if it says I was born in 1853 in St. George, Utah, well, then let them dig through your pedigree real quick to try to find the relative that had that. Okay, and then RootsTech. All you got to remember is the word rootstech.org. And it'll take you to the RootsTech page, and then you can go to sessions, and you can just search for whatever kind of a session would interest you. And because we're talking about short, that's very appropriate for RootsTech, because many of their sessions are just 5 to 10 minutes. 15 minutes is about the max for most of them. There's a few that are longer, but the bulk of them are 10 minutes or less. And so you could find all kinds of things with whatever your interest might be. And so those will be up. Last year's are still showing. There were 1,500 of them. This year's are all up there and showing, and there's maybe 1,500 of them too. So you're looking at about 3,000 presentations that can still be viewed. And all you have to do is go to rootstech.org and then do a search on sessions for whatever topic you're interested in. Discovery pages. Those were made for the person that says, I don't have time, because virtually all of your ancestors now probably have one of these, and they're there to pique people's interest. There'll be some activities. There'll be a timeline that you can see how the people all fit together. It'll show you the family, in this case, the parents and siblings for the person. And over here, there are spouses and children. There'll be story highlights down below. Name meetings, I'll tell you what the last name means, what the first name means. World events that happened during that person's life. And a little short life story. And then they'll give you a little hint to the photos and memories for the person. And Edson here had 89 more besides these 6. So he has 94 different memories. And clicking on it will take you right to them. And remember, anything here that shows incorrect means it's incorrect on his page. And if they say, well, that's not right, then show them how they can go to the person's page and edit it and make it right. But this is a great teaser to get people interested. And there's all kinds of discovery activities. I could have picked from 30 of them. And I picked just one, which is to compare a face, where you put their face in, and you can take a picture right off their computer or their phone if they're using the app, and put your face in there. And then it'll compare your face to your relatives. So like my dad, I've always said, when I look in the mirror in the morning, I see my father and say, oh, good grief, what's going on here? And it verifies that we are almost a 50% match. And he's my highest match on everybody within the family. But that's just one simple little activity that you can do. And what's fun is you can actually then put pictures of other people in there just to see how they fit. So like you could put one of your kids' pictures in there if they don't have an account and call it you. and then have it compare that picture to the relatives and see how they match up too. You don't have to use your picture there. In fact, I've used pictures that I suspected of some of these relatives just to see what kind of a match comes up. So it's kind of a good way to do some verification for pictures that you can't figure out the names for the people. It helps if you've got pictures that are about the same age. That's the hard part. If you got a little child's picture and you're comparing them to adults, you're not going to get as good a match as an adult picture to adults. Okay, so those are some discovery type activities. And like I said, those are really good for people that don't have a very good background. Now, if they have a little better background, they might respond stronger to gathering type activities, ideas and things that help gather their family. And this could be, picking photos and writing a story about them, or writing in your journal, answering life questions, writing down stories about relatives, creating digital photo albums, creating or adding a web story or blog, things like that, that a lot of times we've kind of said, we need to get doing this, but we just never get the motivation. And you might be able to talk them into starting this project, doing it just a little bit each day. There's also things like, and we won't cover, but you could list in here, things like creating or adding a video, creating videos about your family, or, videotaping people in your family, or create or add to a book. And you might wonder, what in the heck am I talking about? Well, you think about it, there's a lot of companies out there where you can digitally go to the company and download pictures of yours onto their site, or upload pictures of yours onto their site and put them into a book, and then either send the book out electronically or print physical copies of them. And this is something that's very popular in a lot of families. And so, this is something to think about as a potential thing. It's a heart-turning experience, just like any of the others. Okay, pick a story and write about it. This is really a great activity because they can find thousands of pictures, and they may know something about the pictures that nobody else knows. And it would be great. They don't have to write a book. I wrote 3 paragraphs on this particular set of pictures. What this is these are my grandparents, my mother's parents, Claude and Helen. They were married back in 1915. My mother was their first and only child. Helen died 2 weeks after my mother was born from complications of childbirth. Actually, a month, about 5-6 weeks after my mother was born. Claude happened to be an avid photographer, so he had a lot of pictures. It never occurred to me until just a couple of years ago, there were no pictures of Claude and Helen together. No wedding pictures, and no pictures at all. Even though I had over a dozen of these posed pairs of pictures where they had been somewhere and took picture of each of them individually. Well, I finally had it explained to me that when my grandmother died, my grandfather needed somebody to raise his daughter, and he ended up marrying, shortly after his wife died, her best friend. My grandmother had been a nurse, and her best friend was a nurse. And so he married Carrie so that she would care for my mother. And Carrie became my mother's mother. And my mother never knew till she was 16 that Carrie really wasn't her birth mother. Well, to keep that secret, Carrie destroyed all the pictures of Claude with Helen, the first wife. So there never is a picture existing that they're together, unless some relative has it and never shared it with me. And so this was kind of a cover-up to keep the secret going that Carrie was my mother's mother, even though she wasn't. And so that's the story, to explain why they're never together in a picture and why I have so many pictures like this. Just a short little story. And I bet you everybody has pictures that need a story written about them. Another thing is to write in your journal. And oftentimes this is a frightening experience. I know, even though I'm a firm believer in it, I'm lousy at it. And I'm forever trying to repent and catch up and make up for things that are missing. But that's something that we can do. Now, just the thought of writing in your journal probably would scare most people away. So it might be better to even have some other alternative. And through this presentation, we'll present a couple of them. One of them is this. One of my children, I think it was my oldest one, Mary, gave us little books, my wife and I, a little book. Mine's A Grandparent's Legacy. And this is a little spiral bound book that has page after page after page of questions, prompts. And I set it next to my recliner, and every once in a while I grab it out and I start writing in it. And I probably have filled in a third of it now with short little answers to all these questions. And you don't realize that by the time you fill the book out, you've actually pretty well covered your life story. And so this is an easy way to help people, because they're scared of the thought of writing their life story or keeping a journal, and B, they don't know what to write. So you give them prompts like, what was your family's finances like when you were growing up, and how did that affect you? Or what mischievous childhood experiences do you remember most? Things like that. Easy little things. And there are places where you can go to get these prompts, and we'll show you one the church has a little later. Another one is just write down the story of a relative. My mother knew her dad's side of the family from when she was a child. Unfortunately, in 1930, they moved to Arizona, and the family was back in Pennsylvania. So she missed a lot of opportunities growing up to where she could have really asked a lot of questions. My mother just made notes on her grandparents. And we've turned those little sets of notes into short little biographical remembrances. And so it's the only thing that's in tree, because my mother was a convert for her grandmother, Mary Jane Bortner Hale. And so she filled out all the things about how she was 4'10" and about 5 feet around. She was fat. She had dark brown hair, which never got gray. She had a terrific sense of humor. This is what I love. This is what I must have inherited. She loved baseball and had a wireless set. That means a radio for you youngsters. She hogged the headset during the World Series every year so that no one else could listen. And so, I mean, these are things that nobody on earth would know about her. But my mother was able to remember these things from when she was a child. Even their little black and white dog named Mike. Or that my grandmother would bathe in a laundry tub in the back of the house. Things that don't relate to us very well nowadays. And get your family to write down these little remembrances of people. Another thing is to build that digital library that you've never gotten around to. And this is something a lot of people might relate to, because they really haven't done much in the way of organizing those 5,000 pictures they have. What I've done over time is each month or so, I download the pictures I take and put them in a folder labeled with that month. So 2013-10 means 2013 October, 2013-11's November of 2013, and so on. And so I have a way to organize the folders roughly Then I also have gone through and started digitizing things like photo albums. Our children each had their own picture books, photo albums. We had a couple for the family. And so I've digitized those so that we can get into them and we can click on like Amy's picture book and see all the pictures that are in her album. She has a lot more than that. That's just an example, but that's a quick way to be able to get to the Amy pictures. And that's a project that could easily be done. You can use your phone nowadays to scan pictures. You don't even have to use a scanner. There's many apps on your phones that will take and digitize those images for you. In fact, that's how most of these were gotten. I've also digitized and organized the pictures from our various vacations. And so I've got a folder for each vacation, and then inside each vacation, I break it down by day so that I can easily get to pictures and locate that picture of the Matterhorn or that picture of the Heidelberg Castle without having to dig through thousands of pictures. They're right there for you. And a project like this might be something that one of your patrons has been wanting to do, but just hasn't gotten started on it. And this is part of family history because they're gathering the pictures. Another one might be to create or add to either a web story or create or add to a blog. I run several blogs, and one of them is a family blog where I take our vacations and I write about them there. And so this becomes the journal of our trips. We took a trip to Branson this year, back end of November, early December of last year. And so this is the last entry. And so as you scroll down through it, you see all the things we did. And then this is from a vacation that we took several years ago where we did the fall colors in the Northeast US and then explored Eastern Canada and ended up in Quebec. And so these are some of the pictures from Quebec and talking a little bit about what we did. It was kind of fun to eat in a restaurant or go by a restaurant that was built in 1640. It was in America, 1640s, going way back there. Of course, when we went to Europe, 1640s, new buildings as far as they're concerned. But doing something like this might turn your family on. Okay, other gatherings. Things like using the Memories app to record your family members, or scan old photos, or scan documents, or organize those files like we've been talking about, maybe adding the metadata. In other words, adding the names of the people that are on the pictures so you can find them, or when the picture was taken, or where. Tag the pictures and documents that are found in Memories. It's amazing when I go in there and look at memories of my relatives, how many of the memories on a person only have one person out of 7 or 8 that are in the memory tagged, which means linking the photo or the document to the different people that are actually in it. And oftentimes there's only 1 or 2 people that have been linked to that document when there's really 7 or 8. And you could easily do that, and that would help everybody in the family. Or uploading a photo or a story or a recording to share, or sorting family documents and verifying the information's on tree. Everybody's got that box. Well, are the things in that box found in tree? Or transcribing a family document if it's hard to read, or sharing a photo, a story, or a document with other family members. So one of the things to think about is getting that Memories app. And when you go to a family gathering, get your phone out and start recording people. All you need to do is say add audio and go around and talk to people and record their answers, and then save those into tree. And you'll have a great way to build on what your family knows about the family, and they'll hear it in the voices of the people that knew the stories. And here's where I put the little story starters. If you don't know what to ask, Family Search, if you go over into their blogs, familysearch.org/en for English/blog/52 stories, you'll find 52 story starters, or actually lists of story starters that you can use. You could probably just go to Family Search to blog and then search for 52 stories. And that way you'll find all kinds of things you could ask. This is really important if you've got elderly family members who maybe don't have much of a life story. Get their stories down, and the easiest way is just have them talk. Because don't they just love to talk? At least most of them. Tag your memories. Remember, tagging means link the people to the memories. And you can do this with your memories to see if you have any that aren't tagged by just setting the filter for not tagged on your memories, and all of them that need a tag will pop up. Now, there's some pictures here with living people. But in this picture here, Susie Brown has passed away, my wife's maid of honor. And so you could, Susie, you could go in and tag her. You wouldn't tag the others because they're alive. Or over here on our oldest daughter's wedding picture, her grandparents are now gone. So we could tag her grandparents. And this memory will show up on the grandparents' pages. So that's a simple little activity that can be done in a minute or two. Not something that takes a lot of time. Another one is scan old photos. This one on the left, I'm looking at it right now here in my office that I'm working from, is a picture I found that I forgot I had. It's a great big one. It's about 18 by 27 inches of my great-great-grandfather, Alexander Wilkins Sr. And so, boy, as soon as I saw that, I took a digital photo of it and posted it to Family Search. You'd be surprised how many people were thrilled to see that, because nobody had ever seen it but me, because I've been hoarding it. I'd forgotten I had it. But you could do that, or you could digitize other old documents you might have. This is a death certificate from my second great-grandmother, no less, who died in 1916. And here's a marriage record for my great-grandparents also, or their great-grandparents, John Beck and Mary Nail. And this was back in 1845. And so, you can find very old documents laying around the house that need digitizing. And today, digitizing is as simple as taking your camera out and taking a digital picture of them. And then hopefully putting them into Family Search. Okay, gathering genealogy can involve things like getting involved in indexing, or building your tree on partner sites, or attaching hints, or finding a relative to research. Maybe help the patron go through and find a relative that isn't very well researched, and then turn this person loose to research the person, or add a new person to tree, or use recommended tasks, which is something Family Search has set up for us. So like I said earlier, this Get Involved new feature, which is the repurposing of indexing, we're going to talk about on April 6th, because that's what our topic is going to be. But involved in that is this review of names, which is something you can do, and it only takes a couple of minutes to do, and you can stop anytime you want. It's the ideal thing for that person that says, I don't have time, because you can show them how if you've got 30 seconds, you can check off a name, you can review a name. And it's amazing how this is starting to change the whole face of indexing. And we'll talk about that on the 6th of April. I'll explain how this fits in with Family Search's new direction they're going with indexing. That's doing recommended tasks, sourcing hints. That's something, once you teach a person how to do that, is very simple for them to either go to the recommended tasks or go out into tree and just make a descendancy of somebody and go through all the hints that pop up for the people, because you can do a hint for somebody in 5 minutes. And it's not hard. It's something that can be done very easy, and they can feel like they've accomplished something without being labeled a researcher, which nobody wants to be called because they think that's too hard. They really are into things. They could try building a tree over at another website and then see all the gazillion things that will pop up on those different websites. This is Ancestry, that will grow and build upon what's in Family Search and increase your knowledge of your various ancestors with sources and records that Family Search doesn't show. Just an idea. That's not one that a lot of people would go for, but it's a possible one. Okay, connecting. That's our last focus area. Connecting ideas, reserve names for the temple, print them on their ordinance cards, make appointments to go to the temple, attend the temple with family members. These are things that as temple and family history consultants, we should always approach our families with if they are temple worthy, or any member that wants to reserve names and give them to other family members. And so, but in addition to that, other things you can do to connect. You can create a family group, which is something new on Family Search, and then share thoughts and ideas and temple work amongst you, or share what you find and learn over social media. Well, first, there's Family Feed, which is a new feature. It used to be when you were on the home page, it'll say, we're testing a new feature, try it. And the only thing that would come up is Family Feed. Well, actually, they've now linked in a whole new homepage for Family Search there. But the middle column of it is this Family Feed, which is a place where you can kind of create a mini family group. It's a feed that only the people that are invited to can see. And you can post images, and you can post messages and text and talk to each other. And only the people in the group will actually see that. And so an example of that Family Feed is here. And before they added all the rest of the features for the homepage, the other features would be found in this area, whoops, over there, not in the middle. The Family Feed's still in the middle. And this is an example where I took that picture and I wrote to my wife and a couple of my daughters that were in our feed a little bit about this picture. And I wanted my one daughter to see if her husband could figure out a way to blend the pictures together. Well, I never have heard an answer yet, but I'd love to put Claude over here on this bench in front of Helen. I'll have to see if I can get a son-in-law to pull that off. But that's supposed
in Photoshop.
Yeah, well, I'm not good at that. And that's why I say let them handle that. Okay, and the last thing, this was really mind-opening to me because it uses more technology and messaging in ways that I'm not thinking about. Mike Sandberg, I think it was back in 2018, or so, 18 or 19, talked about how to spread the word and get people interested in memories. And he was mostly concerned about his children and his nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles and people like that, but especially the younger generation that were more into Twitter and texting, things like that. And he did a little test to see if he could drum up some interest in a story he wrote. And it's called David and the Duck Eggs. And you can actually find David and the Duck Eggs over in Memories still. Basically, it's a short little story about his father, David, who, when he was 9 years old, was allowed to plow the field for the family on the family tractor. And so he was out on the tractor alone in the field with a ripper that would go through and rip up the soil and prepare it for the planting for the year. Not actually a plow, but just a thing that would rip up the soil and loosen it all up. I'm not a farm boy. He talks about the tractor had a clutch, and the clutch was a handle clutch, not a foot clutch. And if you wanted to stop it, you had to pull the clutch to get it to disengage so that it would stop. And so as David, Mike Sandberg's dad, was 9-year-old boy, was driving along, he saw a duck fly up from in front of him, and he could see a nest out there, and he didn't want to rip up that nest. So he pulled the handle back to disengage the clutch, and the clutch was real tight. And what it did is it flipped back forward and flipped Mike, or not Mike, but David, right out of his seat to where he was holding on to the clutch for dear life, because the plow was still going forward and he was now hanging out in the open where if he let go, the plow was going to plow over him and probably kill him. I know about that kind of a situation firsthand, as one of the students in the school I taught in was plowed over by her own father one night on the farm when she fell off the back of the tractor and he was disking, and it went right over her and killed her. Well, David could have easily died. Fortunately, he was able to get a footing and actually pull back and get the clutch to disengage. And then he ran out there and grabbed the duck nest and moved it to the side. And then he went home and told his mother what had happened. And his mother got really upset with him and went to the father and said, "You can't let him ever drive that tractor again till he gets older. He's too young. He's going to get killed out there," which was probably fairly likely. So anyway, he took this little story and he got a picture of it along with some pictures that go with the story. And he sent it out to a whole group of his family, the younger generation, about 9 of them. And then he sat back just to see, I wonder what'll happen. Well, he started getting answers. Kathy said, "That's awesome. The pictures really make you want to open up and read the article." Rebecca said, "What an amazing story. I've never heard about that one. Love the pictures as well. I opened it on my phone and it let me read, but I couldn't figure out how to make a comment. Maybe I need an app." And Tanya said, "Yeah, I love the pictures. I've always heard the story, but your hashtags cracked me up. This is really neat," because he was putting hashtags in there. And Jennifer said, "That's super cool, both the story and how you shared it. And please remember, hashtag mom knows best." And then somebody said, "Dad, you look like Pete." And so it really got the family talking. He said he couldn't believe how sending out that little story to a bunch of his, tweeners and young adults would have such an impact on them. If he had said, go over in Family Search and read this, they probably wouldn't have done it. But because he sent it out in a message, most of them read it and they were thrilled to get it. So just some simple little thing like that can make a big difference in families and showing people, we're giving people ideas like that. Okay, so your goal is to keep a record of these kind of ideas and activities so that when your patrons claim they don't have time, you're ready with a stack of solutions. And you can say, well, let's see, let's try this or this or this, or what you really do is you start and say, what kind of stuff are you interested in? And then you can go to your little box of tricks and say, let's try this or let's try that. Remember, the whole point of what we're doing is trying to change hearts. And to change the heart, we've got to get them to participate. So, questions?